Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I've got a closing statement that I want to make after this panel that we had talking about how Mark Carney changes things. He's the leader of the Liberal Party now. He's the Prime Minister designate. And we had some really smart people that have been involved in politics to a greater degree than I, saying that he should follow the Ford playbook and call an election right away and make it all about competing with Trump. I disagree. I think that he's got a bigger issue, and that is that we are in a trade war. It is not, thankfully, a war, but it is a trade war where we have the President of the United States challenging our sovereignty and attacking us effectively through economic means. And I think that Mark Carney, the Government of Canada, the Parliament of Canada, the premiers of this country have a very important role to play before we have the election. And these people, these operatives that I have a lot of respect for, probably are right from a pure political standpoint, that the best thing for Carney to do would be to call election right now, come off of the honeymoon, the increase in the polls that he enjoyed with his 86% leadership victory, and ride it to victory against Pierre Poilievre. But I'm going to suggest a different strategy. And I think that if you were at war, trade war, and if you were thinking about how best to attack the situation, I've got a several-point plan. The first thing is, I think that he's got to appoint a cabinet. It's got to be a smaller cabinet. It's got to have some current people that have played good roles in their interactions with the United States in their current roles. But it's got to have new people, fresh blood that positions it very differently than the last Liberal Trudeau government cabinets. Next, he's got to meet with the premiers, and he's got to get all the premiers on board with a Team Canada approach. Third, I think he should meet with the leaders, or offer to meet with the leaders of all the other federal parties, to try to get them to agree with his strategy and the agenda for moving forward. And I think all but Pierre Poilievre will meet with him and agree to support him, at least for a while. Then I think he needs to have a speech from the throne that's going to lay out the agenda. Then I think he needs to present a budget that will do what we need to do to stimulate the Canadian economy in the face of a trade war and a probable situation with layoffs, bankruptcies, and a potential for a recession. Then I think after all that, he needs to go see Donald Trump, and he shouldn't go to see Trump too early. He shouldn't do the trip to Mar-a-Lago, the trip to the Oval Office that too many other people have done. He should get strength behind him before he does that. But it is the right thing to do, because in the end, negotiations are between people, and he needs to go see Donald Trump. What does he need to include in, first of all, the speech from the throne and the budget? First is what he promised on Sunday, which is eliminate the consumer carbon tax, and number two, get rid of the increase in the capital gains tax. And he needs to do that in the speech from the throne, but he needs to do the budget, and he needs to get the Parliament to vote in favor of that. He needs to challenge Pierre Poilievre to not vote in favor of those two issues. Then I think he needs to think really seriously about an emergency infrastructure spending plan that will ensure stability and resilience of the Canadian economy in the face of trade war, tariffs, and a potential recession. And I think there's a couple of things, and I'm not smart enough to know all those different things, but I think if we've got a situation where car manufacturers, steel, aluminum manufacturers, et cetera, may be challenged because of the tariffs going into the United States and their businesses down, let's make use of that empty capacity, manufacturing capacity, employ those people, give business to those companies to keep those people employed and doing things productive for the Canadian economy. I think we should do emergency pipeline approvals. Clearly, we have to get the Indigenous people on side. We need to get Quebec on side. But I think that at this time, with a federal, provincial, and Indigenous Peoples Conference, we could get them on side and quickly and approve from a national environmental approval standpoint, and order the pipes and start laying the pipes as quickly as possible. Get those steel mills working, making pipes. And that pipeline should be at least the Northern Gateway from Alberta to the BC coast, and it probably should also be all the way from from Alberta to the East Coast. And this pipeline that currently goes through, that takes energy from Alberta down through the United States to Ontario, that was threatened even a year ago, maybe it was 2 years ago, by the governor of Michigan to cut it off. We cannot risk being subject to the whims of either a president or a governor that wants to turn off our energy. We need to have a pipeline that goes north of Superior to bring that energy to Ontario. Electrical grid. We need to have our own electrical grid right across this country. High-speed rail. I think, people made fun of Ford's comment about tunneling underneath the 401. I think high-speed rail makes a lot more sense than that. And I think that we have the technology and Canadian manufacturers that are going to be challenged with tariffs in producing goods to sell to the United States. And they could use the business of making some trains for high-speed rail. And you know what? If we're going to be working less with New York and Boston and the United States, we should be traveling a lot more between Montreal and Toronto and between Quebec City and Windsor. And so, once again, immediate national approval of and not just high frequency rail, but high speed, truly high speed, comparable to the TGV in France. We should be proud of the best trains that created Canada back in 1867, etc., and do that high speed rail now. Mines, critical minerals, the Ring of Fire. If there are major developments that have been stalled because of regulatory impediments and red tape that we can get going now in our time of need, where we need to get these resources approved, production out of the ground, and keep people employed, now's the time to do it. And that should be part of the budget. And the money should be made available to approve these projects or spur these projects. Second, maybe I'm third now, defense spending should be brought to 2% of GDP, as is our NATO commitment. It should have been done already. It should be now. And if we can't do it this year because of logistics, it should be committed to be done in 2026. And I think if there's auto plants that are closing down or scaling back, let's use them to rebuild the equipment that everyone has told us we don't have. We don't have enough armored vehicles. We don't have enough tanks. We don't have enough ships. We don't have enough, a whole bunch of things. And we're using things that are old. Let's do what some people in the United States have criticized the United States of getting rid of all their old stuff by shipping it to Ukraine. Well, let's get rid of all the stuff that we think is out of date and offer it to Ukraine and rebuild a new Canadian military. And then some of that equipment we could also give to Ukraine and not demand critical minerals ownership for it, because it's our responsibility to protect democracy and the sovereignty of not only Canada, but of other nations in the world that are under threat. We should cancel this F-18. I have been told that there is source code that would allow this F-18, once used by the Canadian Air Force, to be turned off in the United States, that we would never have control. Similarly, ongoing repairs and maintenance would be reliant on parts and maintenance people from the United States. Given this situation right now that we are in between Canada and the United States, we cannot risk that kind of a situation. We should immediately cancel. And if we can't cancel for an outrageous amount of money, or for less than an outrageous amount of money, we should order those products, but immediately find someone else that wants to buy them, because there are other people that want these F-18s in the world. We should right away negotiate to buy the jets that are available from Sweden, that I'm told are just as good, if not better, and we can get complete control of them. And we should demand from Sweden that a certain percentage of those jets are built in Canada by Canadian employees and by Canadian companies. I think we should spend in the Arctic. And I think that we've talked about, Mark Carney's talked about how we need 2 military bases in the Arctic. This is the time to do it. I think we need icebreakers. I think we need our own independent satellite system, not dependent on Elon Musk. We need to make sure that there's no one in the United States that can turn off our access to satellites like they're doing in Ukraine and threatening to do in Poland. I think we need to get to 2% of GDP spending on defense, our NATO commitment, if not this year, next year. And this needs to be in the budget. And we need to say to Pierre Poilievre and to all the leaders of all the other parties, are you in agreement? I think we need to immediately remove all interprovincial trade barriers. And I know this is a provincial issue that we need to get all the provinces to agree to. I think the federal government needs to say in the speech from the throne, this is our intention, and we'll do everything we can and need to do to motivate the provinces to do so. And in that federal provincial meeting that Mark Carney, the new prime minister, convenes, I think he should be requesting it, if not, frankly, demanding it. And it's the right thing to do. And the Canadian public should be demanding of all of our premiers that it's the right thing to do. The fact that I can't order BC wine, I want BC wine and Quebec wine. I think we're going to have layoffs. I think we're going to have unemployment. I think we're at risk of a recession. And one of the areas where we could put people to work quicker than anywhere else is building more homes. And we need more homes. And I think that whether it's through the infrastructure monies that the federal government has available that they've been trying to use as incentive to cities to reduce red tape and regulation and reduce development fees, and or it's through CMHC financing, or whether it's through just direct grants such that the cities reduce, or if not eliminate, development fees. I think we need a housing strategy that will, number one, provide the homes that we desperately need to make housing affordability reasonable again for the next generation of Canadians. And we need the work that people need. If lumber is not going to be bought by the United States, if steel is not going to be bought by the United States, if other things aren't going to be bought by the United States, washers, dryers, etc., let's build them in Canada. We need them anyway. We just need to get rid of the red tape, get rid of the regulation, get rid of the development fees, and get the federal government to incentivize and provide the money and the wherewithal to get this done. I think we need to invest in innovation. The U.S. has been more productive. It has been more efficient. It has been more innovative than Canada. We've got some of the successes, but we need to use federal research dollars to incentivize more research in Canada such that we create AI. AI was created in Canada. It was created in Canada with government money initially. We need to think about where we can spend government money to incentivize innovation in Canada, in pharmaceutical products, in biotech products, in high-tech products, in green tech products, etc. We should be like the CHIPS Act in the United States, one which I think is a huge success, and Trump is wrong in canceling it. We should have the equivalent of the CHIPS Act in several different sectors of Canadian society, funded by the Canadian government and included in this budget that I'm recommending Mark Carney put in place. Bottom line, I think what we should be doing is putting together a budget that doesn't, like in the pandemic, provide grants directly to people to stay home. We should be providing grants to businesses and people to go to work. And if steel companies, aluminum companies, automotive companies, et cetera, are going to be challenged because of the U.S. tariffs, then let's incentivize them to produce the things we need in Canada and do the things that we need to do in Canada. And then finally, I think what we need to do is we need to rethink these tariffs that we increased against China that made China want to compete with us. Free trade is what Canada should stand for. And I think what we need to do is we need to immediately re-engage with Europe, with Asia, with China, and show as a leader within the world of the benefits of freer trade. It's what has been the biggest catalyst to economic growth in Canada in the last 40 years, 50 years since the free trade agreement was put in place. It's what has been the biggest growth of the economy in the world since World War II. It is what the United States up until recently has supported. And we need to show Donald Trump and the Americans that we stand for free trade and that this increase in tariffs and this tariff war is completely wrong. And so we should get rid of those huge tariffs that we put in place against China, and we should negotiate down tariffs worldwide. We should stand for free trade. If we did this, we have a speech from the throne. We get federal provincial cooperation. We put forward a budget that's got all of these things in it: the elimination of the carbon tax, the elimination of the increase in the capital gains, big infrastructure spending, defense spending, get rid of interprovincial trade barriers, build homes, invest in innovation, get rid of tariffs elsewhere around the world, pay people to work, and keep our companies moving rather than just what you did in the pandemic, pay them stay home. I think we'd have Mark Carney would have, the federal government would have, Canada would have an agenda for the future, for prosperity, and for resilience in the face of a trade war. And I think that also sets Mr. Carney up for the best possible leadership, chairmanship of the G7, where he can say, this is what Canada's done. We've stood for the things that we believe in, the rule of law, the sovereignty of nations, defense spending, NATO, supporting our people, and free trade. And after the G7, if he wants to call an election or he gets defeated in the House of Parliament, so be it. But I think if you got a chance to be Prime Minister of Canada in the most critical time in the history of Canada since, I don't know, World War II, Confederation, I think you take that opportunity. And as my favorite President Bartlett said, winners want the ball. I think you grab that ball, you become Prime Minister, you come out with a speech from the throne, you convene all the provincial premiers, and you come forward with a budget, and you put Canada on the right track. Brian Crombie for the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. Thanks for listening. I hope somebody listens. Good night.